the first paper I got a job at was the Alma Chronicle. Okay, the Alma Chronicle had been there 100 years. So I get this job and I'm so excited that I got a job. I don't even bother really looking at the paper that closely. So there's no ads at all in the Alma Chronicle the day I get hired. The week I get hired, it's like I look back, so there's no ads in this paper. Okay, then the Alma Chronicle went out of business in 2 months. So I was employed there for 2 months before, and this business is 100 years old. So, so then I'm out of work again, and I got lucky. I got in Morton, the Morton Journal, which I am happy to report still is there. Another small town paper, which I really enjoyed, and that's kind of my first experience I got working in small towns, and I found that really appealed to me. I like because I grew up in Burien, which is not a small town. So at that time, Burien was, obviously your classic suburb type situation. But so I worked in Morton, and then one thing that appealed to me about newspapers is at that time you could open an atlas and you could find a job anywhere. Newspapers were in every town, even a little dot on the map. You could find a job. You wanted to live in Mexico, you could find a paper in New Mexico. They could hire you, whatever you wanted to do, It's just like the whole freedom of it was just intoxicating. This idea you could pick anywhere on the map and find a job. So I went to Boston and found a job. And so I worked for Beacon Communications, which is at that time was like suburban Boston, the Lexington, Lincoln, Concord area, kind of the historical, the Revolutionary War town. So I kind of said it was fascinating. It was a blast. It's like being on vacation. Because every weekend you could go see these Revolutionary War sites. So this is amazing. So, but I also say that paper doesn't exist anymore. So more or less it doesn't exist. It got bought by Gannett, or some of them got bought by Gannett. Gannett is basically don't have any local people working for their papers anymore. But that's so anyway, I ended up coming back to Washington State and the Daily Record, and it's odd because all the people I started with, probably none of them stuck with it. I mean, like all my coworkers, like I knew, like in Boston or early on in my career, people who are way more like vested or like had really, really good journalism people, probably a lot more than I was, who had a lot more vested than it seemed like I did, just didn't stick with it. They ended up leaving the profession for a lot of different reasons. So I've stuck with it through 37 years, which is surprising. It surprises all the people who worked with me when I was like 25, for sure. So, but I found I liked small towns, and that's why I ended up in Clown, because I really like Clown. I really love Clown, Roslyn. I lived there for a while, and I just like the connectedness. I growing up in like a suburb like Burien, there's just no connection in Burien. People will tell me Burien is much nicer now than it was when I was, and that's probably true. But there's just you didn't feel like you're part of the community. And as soon as I lived in like a small town, I understood what that community sense was like, why people like small towns. Because there's no reason to live here unless you really love it, because you're not going to make a lot of money. So this is kind of that connection I felt there. And the role the newspaper played in those small towns was this like, I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. I want to be part of that. I want to be that connection and that kind of role the newspaper played in a small town to letting people, what was going on, what their kids were doing, what exciting things their neighbors were doing. All this small town stuff that's, I think is important, but it's just it loops people in and keeps them connected to their small town. And it's like the role the newspaper played in that process to me was like really, really appealing. There's a lot of value in doing that and feeling like you're accomplishing something and you're part of the community. That's definitely I've never worked in a Seattle Times type of situation, so I really can't speak to that. But you really are definitely connected. I mean, people know you and they expect you to do stuff for them, and you're just part of that life. It's just like so integral to why people want to live in a small town. The newspaper is, and that's why when you guys talk about the death of the local newspapers, it's really goes straight to what you think your town is and what you enjoy about your town, and whether you will still enjoy living in your town, in your small community without that type of role that the newspaper is playing. And I think people will not enjoy their town this much. I think that's why I hope for journalism, something akin to what a local newspaper is surviving somehow, because I think there's people that just want it, because that's why they're living in these places. They want that connection, so that's why I've stuck with it over the years, basically because it appealed to me and it felt like it brought value, to the community in which I lived. And Ellensburg is obviously a little bit different. It was just a college town. And you talk about local news. When I got hired for the Daily Record, they hired me over the phone. I was in Boston. I'd never even been to Ellensburg. I'd been east of the mountains once in my life. But so the publisher hires me, talks to me, and goes, well, you get paid for 40. Most people work 60. You're getting paid for 40, but you're working 60. So this was before the 40-hour news week had been applied to the newspaper industry. So so that part of that was like, you talk about meetings and stuff. Well, I covered every single meeting. Every group of 3 or more people, I was there. I covered like solid waste advisory committee meetings, everything you can imagine, every government meeting you can imagine, I covered. So newspapers don't do that much anymore. So there has been a gradual shift from that, even though we still exist. Kind of that has changed over the years. So there's been a gradual loss of that, but I still think it plays a vital role. I think, covering your councils and your various governmental agencies, this is so vital. They all like to post their Facebook stuff nowadays, but that's somebody in a public office or a public agency telling you what they want you to know. There's no interaction there. There's no accountability there. There's really no transparency there. It's just this facade of public interaction by posting something on the Facebook page, and it's not even a comprehensive reach. Not everybody in the world is on Facebook or on Instagram or whatever or Twitter. Especially in small towns, Twitter is not that comprehensive. But so yeah, as far as the newspaper still has a role, and I think it still has I think people still want it to have a role, So that's my main hope. Even though in this time when people are losing jobs and papers are closing, that is why I remain hopeful about your local newspaper.
So I'm going to turn this over to Brier for his comments. Thank you, Brier.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate this opportunity. I'm also just so pleased and impressed with the report that you all did on the situation. I read about this every day. I'm kind of I think I'm the only person in the country in the newspaper business that writes about this full time. So I was thrilled to see you all produce this great report. It's actually been useful for me since it's been produced. I've cited it several times in things that I'm writing about. I've talked about it with legislators and people like that. So really fantastic stuff. I'm really glad to talk about it. I'm also excited to talk about the Kittitas folks. I used to work at the Yakima Herald Republic, and one of my last jobs at the Yakima Herald Republic was regional editor. I think I was probably before Michael was there, because this was like 28 years ago. But yeah, we covered Ellensburg from Yakima and competed with the Daily Record back in the day. Both the Daily Record and the Yakima Herald, of course, are a bit smaller nowadays. But I still feel, lots of fondness for Central Washington. I don't know if you need my whole bio. Third generation Seattleite. I went to Whitman College, English major in Walla Walla. I was hanging out with the newspaper office with some friends, and they got tired of me eating their pizza and drinking their beer and not doing anything. So they asked me to write some stories, and away I went. And I've been doing the newspaper thing ever since. I went from Yakima, from Walla Walla. I got a job. I actually applied to every newspaper on the West Coast when I graduated from Whitman. And the only job I ended up with was in Sequim, Washington, in a little weekly. But it was a great news town, actually. Lots of stuff happening. People really, really, really appreciated the local newspaper during the growth era in the early 90s in Sequim. I went from Sequim to Yakima, and from Yakima to Tacoma. And I was at the Tacoma News Tribune covering actually King County and the stadiums, sound transit, things like that. And then I went to the Seattle Times and started out in a little bureau. We used to have bureaus in smaller communities. We don't do that anymore. The newsroom's about half the size as when I started at the Seattle Times. We still have the largest newsroom, and actually we're the second largest newspaper on the West Coast, circulation-wise, believe it or not, after Los Angeles now. But you know, it's tough. You know, during my career, I've really seen the industry go from an absolute peak in the 90s to a situation now where, you know, every week there's a paper or two that are failing. In fact, I don't know if you heard the news, the Medford paper in Medford, Oregon, Oregon's fourth largest town, has a daily newspaper. The first newspaper in Oregon to win a Pulitzer Prize, the Mail Tribune, that just completely shut down last Friday, on Friday the 13th. And, you know, we haven't had that in Washington for a while, but, you know, it'll happen. We're in a very precarious situation in the news industry.